Everyone is speaking out against this, with OKC teammates voicing heavy disappointment, pointing to one clear message for fans and media alike. The awards finalists dropped for the NBA, and not included on the DPOY list was Lu Dort, the perimeter premier defender on the OKC Thunder, who have arguably one of the best defenses boasted this century. Yet, despite having 3 of the top 10 players in DPOY odds for most of the season, none of them are going to be seen on the final ballot. We're going to get into how the odds have shifted Dort's game and what fans and teammates of Dort are identifying as the problem in him not getting the attention he's deserved. But before we get into the odds and all that, odds are if you're watching this, you are not subscribed to this channel, as 68% of viewers aren't subscribed. With the Thunder in the middle of a playoff run, we're here to bring prime content often. So make sure you subscribe so you can stay up to date with that. But back to the main topic at hand, we're going to get into the DPOY finalists for this year. As we see right here, we got Dyson Daniels, we've got Draymond Green, and we've got Evan Mobley of the Cavs. These are obviously very good players and very star-studded players in their role of defending other teams' premier players. Now, let's just take a look at some raw numbers before we really get into the breakdown of this. First, we're going to take a look at our guy, Lu Dort. Let's look at his defensive numbers. We got half a block and 1.1 steals a game to a tune of 1.6 stocks. Now, as we flip through the rest of these guys, we're going to start to see the pattern emerge of where the problem lies. And looking next, we're going to see Dyson Daniels, a very impressive 3 even steals a game, and then also 0.7 blocks on top of that for the Hawks, Dyson Daniels. Then we look to Evan Mobley of the Cleveland Cavaliers. This big man averages 1.6 blocks and almost a steal per game. And then lastly, we get to the floor general of the Warriors, Draymond Green, who's averaging also 2.5 stocks, same as Mobley, to the tune of 1 block and 1.5 steals per game. Now, looking specifically at the numbers, should Dort be in the conversation? Probably not, right? That's what most people would think. However, the very key element that people are missing with defense, it's the same as in football if you're a top-tier premier corner. People don't want to throw the ball at you, don't want to go at the person you're guarding if you are effectively doing your job. And that is what people are missing in this, and that is where OKC teammates of Dort are really trying to hammer home the point that we need to watch these games. And the fact that we are reaching an era where so much less basketball is consumed traditionally, which would include watching it on television and a full-form game content, and we're seeing more of a highlight-centric era based on House of Highlights and social media content. And I'm not saying that these players aren't good defensive players, but these players have been able to capitalize off of these eye-popping numbers, and even to the tune of Draymond, their own social promotion of themselves for the award. And that's the biggest problem I have with this, is that, especially from the Draymond Green perspective, Draymond Green has been going on his own social medias and promoting himself, and there's evidence that this is part of the reason that he's even in the running in consideration to begin with. If we take a look at some of Draymond Green's numbers from this year, which we're going to take a look at, they're not as eye-popping as a guy like Dyson Daniels or Evan Mobley, though they are up there, and they're above a guy like Lu Dort, maybe on the number scale. However, his odds weren't reflective of him being in this race for most of this year. On March 15th, we see Draymond Green at a plus 800 favorite, Evan Mobley at a minus 300 favorite. This was shortly after Wemby had dropped from the race, and it was known for his blood clots that he wasn't going to be playing this year and would finish below the 65-game minimum for the award. So that's whenever the odds opened up towards everybody else, because Wemby was going to be the consensus DPOY this year. That does need to be acknowledged as well. However, 4 days after Draymond is the plus 800 favorite, they beat the Knicks on ESPN, and he goes into the locker room and he declares himself the DPOY. And that begins the run of Draymond saying he is the DPOY on all of his podcast episodes, promoting himself as the DPOY on his podcast episodes. And then just a whopping 3 days later, 1 week after Draymond was a plus 800, Draymond Green sits at a plus 100 to win DPOY, and Evan Mobley moves up to a plus 105. This is ludicrous movement, and we aren't the only ones who see this. Yes, yesterday we saw Isaiah Hartenstein say that if what Lu Dort needs to do more to win the DPOY, maybe he needs to start a podcast. Maybe that is what he needs to do. But when we look at this, we aren't the only ones who feel this way. How do we know this? Well, let's take a look at what the Cavs are thinking. Looking at Darius Garland, their starting point guard, and he's talking about Evan Mobley's promotion for the award, and he says, I think we're just going to go the media route, have the media just do what they do. We've been tweeting it a little bit. We've been putting it out there just on our end. But then he starts to get into Draymond Green and how he is able to promote. He says, Draymond really has a cheat code with his podcast. He really can go on there every day, which is super cool, and it's really working. And I really just find this to be very telling of how Draymond's really managing this almost PR run of his. And it's working, and it's because he can get on there every day, and basketball is an everyday sport. It's something that is digestible by fans, and especially on a social media level, you have a player himself on social media giving insight, giving his number. He's giving his side of the story, almost where no one else is able to respond to it and give their exact points of why they believe they're valuable. Lu Dort's value isn't predicated in stats. Lu Dort's value is predicated in taking away the best scoring option on the floor in the most vital moments. That's what Lu Dort does better than anybody in the league. And the way I can point to this is everyone is predicating for Lu Dort. Yet, when you look at his defensive rating, he is right in the middle on our team. He's the 5th best defender in the defensive rating in the league. 9 of the top 10 are Thunder. Why would the Thunder be advocating for someone in the middle of the pack on the team in defensive rating if there wasn't more to the story than just the stats? Why wouldn't we be pushing for Aaron Wiggins to be the defensive player of the year since his defensive rating is better, or J-Dub, or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's already on an MVP level and as a two-way player? Why wouldn't we be pushing for him to complete the Jordan MVP and DPOY season so we could further push his narrative of how good he is? We want Lu Dort to win it because Lu Dort is the best defender in the league, and he's shown it. Take a look at the Lu Dort effect that Shai has done his part in promoting. When we play good teams, they come and they struggle. Why do they struggle? Because Lu Dort takes the premier matchup every night. Yes, we have one of the best complete team defenses, but that shouldn't take away from the ability of one man to take away half of the floor, half of the team. Now, when we look at another reason that we can see, we look at Caruso and Dub. Caruso has a podcast called The Young Man in the 3A Play on JJ Redick and LeBron's Old Man in the 3A podcast. And he had Dub on as a guest, and they were talking about what needs to change in a lot of modern basketball, and they were talking a lot about it just needs to be attention to detail and views, because people, they're looking at box scores, they're looking at stats, and a guy like Dort, that won't do him justice because teams are trying to get switches off of him. They're trying to stay away from someone that dominant on the ball. Someone who is a good defender is someone who, down by 1 in the clutch and you need to stop, makes LeBron airball a fadeaway. Someone who, up by 1 in the clutch, makes Kawhi hit the backboard on the last shot at the buzzer. We're talking about, that's Lu Dort. Those are things that Lu Dort has done. We're talking about a guy, Mark Daigneault said in preparation for the Mavericks series, his plan to guard Luka Doncic was to make sure that Lu Dort showed up to the game on time. This is the level of player we're talking about. And that's what the caliber of player Lu Dort has been playing at. And just because the numbers don't say that, it's a real shame that no one's going to acknowledge it. And it's just a tragic, tragic situation for him to be in. And further on to what Mark Daigneault had to say about it. Let's see what he says about the help that the team has around him and how that changes and plays into him winning individual awards. Mark Daigneault has to say, doesn't hurt our team, but it may hurt him to have that many good defenders because we can't control how people vote. The goal that everybody has on defense is what? To get stops. Let's not get lost in all these different numbers and stats. And that's what Daigneault has to say, and I couldn't agree more with the sentiment. This is a vital part of the game, and if you play defense at any sort of level like that, players are going to avoid trying to score on you and throw the ball your way and carelessly put the ball in situations where you're going to be able to take advantage of it because of your defensive prowess. A guy like Dyson Daniels, I'm willing to bet a lot of money he is not going to average 3 steals next year just due to the fact that teams are going to do a lot more to keep him out of situations where he can get his hands on the ball. And that's where Lu Dort is right now, and that is just something that is going to have to be acknowledged. You look at the Thunder, and every single player on their team, from Hart to Dub to Shai. Shai said to give all of his DPOY votes whenever he was sitting in 6th place to Dub. If we take a look at some of the progression throughout the year, this was the 26th of March, whenever Draymond Green was the favorite. Mobley was plus 120. Lu Dort sat at a plus 2,900 behind Dyson Daniels at plus 17. But then we moved to a 1 week later. Let's look at this. We look at Lu Dort and Daniels. They flip places. Lu Dort is sitting on plus 800 odds now, and Dyson Daniels is sitting on plus 3,000 odds a week later. This is a week later. The most recent odds that we had before the finalists were selected that were confirmed. And we have Lu Dort much more prevalent to be the pick for DPOY. And Dyson Daniels' stats were projecting down. He averaged the least amount of steals that he did in a month at 2.1 in April. He was projecting down, and he still got the finalist nod over Dort. I believe that is preposterous. I believe that it is almost even malicious because you have a guy like Shai and Hart were sitting 6 and 7 in DPOY race for most of the year, and it just feels like a disingenuous. People are just pushing it off as a team thing, when in reality, that's not at all what it is. It almost feels like Draymond Green is getting the opposite end of the stick because they don't have a center and he's playing center and he's just controlling the defense, and he almost gets a nod for controlling their defense and being basically the floor general on their defense. Yet Lu Dort fills out the same role for the Thunder, and it's almost a knock on him that he has good defenders around him. I think that the way that the Thunder have handled this, their almost PR from their players and their coach, just shows how valuable and impactful Lu Dort is. And we're going to see it this postseason run as we get farther, and he's going to get stuck on guys like LeBron if we play the Lakers. He's going to get stuck on the hardest matchup on the floor at all times, and you're going to see him take the challenge head on like he's done the last 3 years. And more often than not, he's going to come out victorious, and he's going to be the reason that the team's going to come out victorious more often than not. Lu Dort should have been in the nomination for Defensive Player of the Year. I believe he should have been the Defensive Player of the Year. But for him to not even be a top 3 finalist, the NBA needs to step it up. They have one of the best defenses of all time, and their leader, who also is one of the most feared perimeter defenders in the league, named as one of the most feared perimeter defenders in the league by top isolation players. And he's not getting the nod over a 35-year-old Draymond Green because of numbers. It's because of numbers. If you take any offensive player and you want them to get a bucket, and you would ask, would you rather have Lu Dort guarding you one-on-one or Draymond Green one-on-one? What do you think they're going to say? A lot of players can go around Draymond Green. A lot of players are struggling when they enter the torture chamber this year. That's all I have this time, guys. I'll see you in the next one. It's been Gabriel Ebersole at Digest Media. I'll see you guys.